everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be about tips for new canners. So I have been canning for about 8 years now, pressure canning for 5, water bath canning for 3 years before that. So probably about 8 years in total. So I've learned a few things along the way. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I would say I've probably made every single last one of these mistakes at one time or another. And from time to time, we continue to do it. Or I should say, I continue to do it. Just the other day, I was canning up something and I forgot to do one of these steps. So I just wanted to give you some tips if you're new to canning and you want to get into it. It's not hard. You just have to take your time. I know sometimes it can seem daunting, but it's really not. Take your time, do your research, and you will definitely reap the rewards in the end. Okay, so let's get started. You want to get everything together before you start. Whatever canning session project you're going to do, you want to get your jars, your lids, your utensils, your canner, everything you need. You want to get it all together before you start your project. So you're not having to go here, there, and everywhere looking for things you need and want for your project. And you definitely want to make sure you have enough jars for whatever project you are doing. You don't want to get into a middle of a project and realize you don't have enough jars. Keep all my canning utensils together. I have a little bin that I got from the dollar store. I have my sieves, my ladles, my measuring cups. I also got these little tongs here with the rubber tips on them to use for my Tetler lids because I didn't like the way the metal was on them. So I got them with the rubber tips specifically for my Tetler lids. And I paid $1 for them at the dollar store. I got my little measuring spoons. Everything goes into this bin and it stays there for canning only. That's all I use these utensils for, is canning. So everything is right at my fingertips. I also store my magnetic wand in here, my little debubbling and measuring tool, and also my jar lifter, which is great, and my wide mouth funnels. Now the other one I have is a little plastic one and it's in the dishes, so I was doing a canning project. But I do have 2 funnels, a metal one and a plastic one, and I store it right in here. So I do have another one of these little bins, and I store all my rings and lids in here, as well as my labels. I have those little dissolvable labels, which I can't stand, and I can't wait to finish using them. And I also have my other little labels that I put the dates on. So the next tip I have for you is to wash your jars, lids, and rings in some warm soapy water with either some vinegar or some baking soda, and that just helps to get any debris or any oils or anything like that off your jars and rings and your lids. You also want to be checking at this time your seals and your jars for any chips or cracks. That's really important. So you also can sterilize your jars in the oven, or you can sterilize them in some boiling water. Now, as you can see, these lids I left overnight in my vinegar water because I was canning and I was going to be following the next day with another canning session, so I didn't feel it was a problem. But as you can see, they are starting to rust. So overnight this happened. I left them about 7 o'clock in the evening and I was back to them about 8, 9 o'clock the next day. And as you can see, they are starting to rust. So you have to be really careful with these metal lids and rings. So I won't ever be doing that again. That's a lesson learned. The next tip is you want to be canning the freshest fruits and vegetables you can get a hold of. And take that with a grain of salt, because I've frozen, say, tomatoes and peppers because I didn't have enough to do a batch of canning, say, for stewed tomatoes. And I've actually frozen them until I had enough to do my batch. I've also done jam from frozen berries and they come out fine. So you want to be doing your canning from as fresh as you can, but it's not essential. Next tip, Headspace. Don't overfill your jars. Your meats and your jams will have 2 different headspaces. This tip will get you a good seal on your jars. Wipe your rims of your jars with some vinegar and a clean cloth. You want to get any debris that might be on those rims from you filling your jars. This will get you a good seal between your jars and your lids. Now this tip is something I struggle with all the time. You want to put your rings on fingertip tight. I have a problem with siphoning in my jars, and I thought it was because of this, and I think it still is. So this is a tip I'm still working on. Fingertip tight. You don't want to crank them down. So this next tip could mean the difference between a good product and a bad product. Debubble. As you can see, I have the liquid in, and right down the bottom there's no liquid, so that's an air pocket. And as you can see that bubble moving across that jar? I haven't debubbled, and you want to do that because that can cause bacteria to build up in your jar and spoil your content. So this is my cold room, what I lovingly call my cold room. And there has been much discussion about this next tip. To store your jars with or without the bands on. I have stored them both ways. What you're seeing here is some butter that I've stored with the ring on, some celery with the ring on, some pickled cucumbers with the ring on very loosely. There's the butter again. Here is some jams and jellies, my meats with the ring off, some peppers with the ring off, some stewed tomatoes from 4 years ago with the ring on and no problems with it. Those are the labels that I can't stand. And I have stored them both ways, and I haven't had, knock on wood, any problems whatsoever. Here's my honey. Now, I store my honey with the ring tightly cinched down on it because they are not processed in any way. They are just raw honey. So this is a tip that can go one of two ways or both ways. It's up to you. You can store your jars with the ring or without the ring. There are some that are for it and some that are against it. I'm for both, depending on what's in my jar or what my needs are at the time. So you decide for yourself how you want to store your jars in whatever room you want to store them in, however you want to store them. And another tip, store them correctly. Store them in a cool, dark place. You don't want them in direct sunlight. You don't want any artificial light on them as much as possible, in and out. You want them in a dark, cool place. So store your home canning in a dark, cool place. This is my cold room, as I call it. It's in my basement. It's about 10 degrees colder than the rest of the basement, and this is where I store my home canning. And as you can see, there's a little bit of rust on a couple of old jars. This jar is from 4 years ago, and I don't see a lot of that, just here and there on the older jars, like 4 more years. And we're going to use them up soon before anything can happen to them. So the next tip, bottled lemon juice is your friend. Fresh lemon juice you would think would be better, but it's not, because the pH in bottled lemon juice is more consistent than that in a fresh lemon juice. Next tip, you want your canner to be the same temp as your jars. If you are doing a raw pack, your canner should be cold. If you are doing the hot pack, your canner should be hot. Next tip, use the proper canning method. This is my electric pressure canner. I use a tall stock pot for my water bath canning. I find this is a lot better than the water bath canner that I have. You can use either one for water bath canning, a large pot, or in this case, a water bath canner, which I have, and it's the first canner I ever bought, but as you can see, the label's still on. I've never used it. Next tip, a vitally important one. Use proper canning time. This is so important to be getting a usable product in the end. You don't want to do all this work and have something happen. Use proper canning timing, whether it be water bath canning or pressure canning. My next tip to you is do not place a hot jar on a cold surface. So, for instance, you're taking your jars out of your canner. You don't want to put it down on a cold countertop. You want to have something underneath. In this case, I am using a silicone pot rest. You can use a dishcloth. You can use whatever you have. But you don't want to sit your hot jars on your cold counters. You want to wash your jars in some warm soapy water and dry them before you pack them away. Another tip, if your kitchen is cold like mine, you can cover them with a dish towel just to keep the draft off of them. So finally, know when to be creative. Find some good resources for canning. I use these 4 books and also the National Center for Home Preservation website. I have times and methods as well as recipes at my fingertips. I hope this video has helped you on your canning journey. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit that notification bell to be notified when I upload videos. Thank you so much for watching, and you have a good day. So one more tip. If this is your first pressure canning session, I would say start with something like beans. They're inexpensive. You can get them just about anywhere, and if you mess it up, it won't cost you a lot.